I wish to come back to the story from yesterday about an aircraft that was cut in half by the wingtip of another aircraft. If you look at this aircraft here, I mean, it's a write-off, but it just goes to show hell of a lot of vehicles there. It just goes to show how fragile aircraft are, and they have to be uh, very lightweight in order to fly and carry cargo. But the skin of an aircraft is aluminium, and it's designed to fly through the air, but it's not designed to take any kind of impact. This is why aircraft's noses are frequently severely damaged, nose cones, by birds and things like that. So they are fragile, and the only significant weight of the aircraft is in the engines and in the landing gear. The rest of the aircraft is incredibly fragile. But it's good for what it's supposed to do, which is fly through the air. And that is what it's designed for. It's not designed to take any sort of impact at all. Now, by chance, today is September the 11th. Does that date ring a bell with you? Can you think of anything that might have happened on September the 11th that might have made a major difference to our lives, which impact all of us, especially Muslims in general, who got framed for something they didn't do? And even today, the Palestinian people are suffering atrocities with the permission of Western governments, partially or mostly based upon many lies that have been told in the past. Now, let's go to one of these lies. Well, 23 years ago today, the world public was shown repeatedly, because don't forget how important repetition is in order to get people to believe lies, because all this is psychology 101. This is all basic stuff. You can even see it in personal life. If people get their lies in first, they have an enormous advantage. And there are people out there who are very cunning and very devious and very evil, and they can frame other people for things they didn't do. Now, if you look at all these images, you will see that according to the official story of 9/11, a Boeing aircraft, can't remember which model off the top of my head, it doesn't even matter, crashed straight through the World Trade Center. It absolutely went straight through the building. Wings, fuselage, and tail section, the whole lot went into the building, and nothing was to be seen. I mean, no fuselage collapsed down the side of the building. Now, that is what would have happened. What would have happened if an aircraft had genuinely hit the building. That's what would have happened. The vast majority of the aircraft would have fallen, especially the wings and engines and tail, would not have fallen, would not have impacted the building, but would have fallen out of the building. I mean, until the engines reached the side of the building, everything else would just be smashed to pieces on impact. It would be turned into aluminium confetti. So these are some of the hundreds of thousands of images which were used to reinforce the nonsense of 9/11, to create a pretext for war with Muslims in general and Arabs in particular. It was a lie. It was an enormous lie. And frankly, it was an obvious lie, because what we are shown is physically impossible. And anybody with an ounce of common sense, if you prefer, I could use metric, anybody with a gram of common sense would be able to see that this is nonsense, right? But the problem is, even though it's nonsense, and even though it's actually very obvious nonsense about this event, and these images just CGI because what we were shown, I mean, there are people out there who, I mean, obviously they're under Official Secrets Act and things like that. There are people there who actually, lots of people out there who participated in this, right? They were working in newsrooms, they were working in government departments, police departments, fire departments, they were working in the military, they were working in CGI and media. Hundreds of thousands of people around the world participating simultaneously in creating a totally faked event which defies the laws of physics, right? Muslims cannot defy the law of physics. One of the very first people who actually wrote a synopsis on this, I think it was John McMichael or something, and you can find it if you look. It was written almost immediately after 9/11, maybe a week or so later. It said Muslims defy the laws of physics. Very well written. He looked into it. He could see that it was completely fake. But despite that fact, and despite the passage of 23 years, today is the 23rd anniversary of this horrible act of terrorism. And yes, it was terrorism. There's no doubt about it. 9/11 was a terrorist attack. But who are the terrorists? Are they the cartoon characters the media tell you about? Bin Laden and ISIS, which, for those who do not already know, actually stands for Israeli Secret Intelligence Service, right? It's obvious nonsense. And but you know, I don't just blame the organisers of this shit. Wicked and evil and disgusting though they are, and these people are responsible for the deaths of millions of people worldwide. Not just through this event, but through every scam that they get involved in, whether it's climate change or vaccinations or whatever. It's the same group of cutthroat bandits who are behind everything. It's the public who instantly are tricked into believing things based upon a obviously fraudulent presentation. The public have no logical, critical thinking skills. Whenever they're shown any event, they are then told what to conclude, right? Muslims attack the World Trade Center. Well, hang on a minute, these images cannot be true. They can't be true. You know, if you throw an egg through a wall and it goes through, that means it's CGI. It has to be. And if an aircraft allegedly hits the World Trade Center, it cannot possibly just go straight through. Look at that. Look at this picture here, for example, this one here. Do you think the fragile wings of an aircraft and tail could do that to a building? These are steel structures. This is a steel. And of course, the World Trade Center was actually physically designed to take aircraft impact. And you can see interviews where engineers involved in the World Trade Center build said that the World Trade Center was designed to take multiple airstrikes because it's like the screen, it's like the door of a mosquito netting on a screen door. Doesn't matter how many holes you make in it, it will still remain intact. And that's exactly what would have happened if an actual aircraft had hit the World Trade Center. So not only was the impact damage completely fraudulent, it was done by explosives and charges within the building, but the collapse of the building was also completely impossible because a building of that design specification, and I've seen videos of the World Trade Center being constructed in the early 60s, and I've also seen many, I mean, because I've been looking at this issue for 23 years, but I don't come back to it very often because there are so many other issues that keep being pushed. I mean, how can we discuss 9/11 when every couple of days there's another fake school shooting or another rioting and wars and vaccines and climate change and all the other bollocks designed to keep the public in a permanent state of fear, right? I mean, I can see what they're doing, but why can't other people see what's going on? You see, they don't want to. I send videos to people, they never even watch them. I say, take a look at this, have a look at this. They don't respond. They won't even respond because they know, actually, they're cowards and they don't want to look into the evidence. So they kind of self-censor themselves. They lie to themselves. Yeah? And of course, don't get me started on Building 7. I mean, Building 7 was a 47-story skyscraper owned by the same guy, Larry Silverstein, personal friend of Netanyahu, who said on Israeli radio in Hebrew that 9/11 was very good for Israel. It's quite extraordinary how Muslims are always doing things that benefit Israel, right? Isn't that a bit odd? Why would Muslims always want to help Israel with these crazy things that they allegedly do? Well, that's because Muslims didn't do it. And then, in order to get people to dislike Muslims, the Israelis organize mass immigration to Western countries. They then frame Muslims for things they didn't do. And to be fair, Muslims quite often do things that we don't particularly like, right? Because their culture is somewhat incompatible with ours, at least on a collective basis. But then again, Judaism is incompatible with our civilization. More incompatible than Muslims, in fact. So basically, Muslims and Christians are being set up to fight each other by the Zionists, who create all these events in order to get them to keep control. We're being played, right? 9/11 was an inside job. It was not done by the people we're told it was done by. But the public don't want to know that, and they will not look at evidence that shows that not to be true. Right? They are participating. They are colluding. And if you collude with wickedness, you become wicked yourself. There's no excuse to be ignorant when the evidence is out there. People such as myself have spent a long, long time trying to get the message out. But what happens is the people who know aren't in a position to tell the people who don't know. There's a certain percentage of the public, don't know what percentage it is, 2% maybe, 1 or 2%, who are sincerely interested in finding out what's going on behind the scenes. They want to know about the world we live in. They want to know who's calling the shots, who's the guy behind the screen, right? We read between the lines. We don't assume that what we're being told has to be true, right? But we are a tiny minority. And the vast majority of people will not even listen to people like us. They assume what we're conspiracy theorists, even though the so-called conspiracy theories are objective facts that you could check for yourself and would find that they would check out. So, 23 years, eh? And in all that time, nothing whatsoever. Look at the building collapsing at free full speed. Pyroclastic car, like a volcano. If the building had simply collapsed due to fire, this would not have been what we are shown here. You see ejected steel beams, which will embed themselves into nearby buildings with enormous power. That's a pyroclastic. That's building exploded. It obviously exploded, right? And then there were airplane debris on other, there was engine parts and stuff that was put underneath a road sign, Murray Street. Look, I've looked into this for years. 100% certain this is a inside job. And yet 23 years later, 90% of the people don't know that. More than 90%. So, and they'll never know it because they don't want to know. You can't wake up a person who's pretending to sleep. Thank you for your time.